Hey guys, welcome back to Trekyards. I am Captain Foley.
And I am Connor Cummings. Hey guys!
That's you out there.
Well, I was being enthusiastic, Stuart, because today we should be enthused. I was enthused, certainly. Weren't you enthused?
I was, and I am. Yeah, absolutely. We got thrown a bone, if you will, in the latest episode of Lord X, episode 5, Cupid's Errant Arrow. We got a nice flashback. We got a Deep Space Nine shot, and also another ship as well.
Yeah. No, it was definitely one of those moments that you're just like, wait, what? And it tells us, it sets a very excellent precedent. Like, we know there's going to be legacy characters. We're 5 in, we haven't seen any. At least 2/3. And we've said as well, they should be showing different uniforms as they go different parts of the Federation, because Michael Mann said this is a uniform that, it's kind of a test one. It didn't go very far. But, there's multiple uniforms in the universe, but we should see other uniforms. And so we're wondering, well, can they? Will they? And so to see a flashback to the past, which, Stuart, you ready for this? Has not been visually retconned. The first time since 2005 with Into Mirror Darkly where they showed a past bit of technology and it wasn't retconned. J.J. Abrams retconned pre-TOS NX to look a certain way with the Franklin and the Kelvin. Who cares? Star Trek Discovery retconned every single element of the past. And Star Trek Picard didn't reuse the past. That's fine. I guess retconned the new song, retconned the idea of androids, whatever. This show didn't retcon a damn thing.
You know why? Because it's canon. It's a universe.
Yeah. And Mike McMahon legitimately cares. Like, really cares. Yeah, we saw DS9. We saw a Olympic class. And then we cut inside. And they didn't have to do this. They could have said the new uniforms. But they went full out. So, Stuart, what did you think seeing the old uniforms in the new animation style? And how did that make you feel?
I was tickled pink. I was super excited. I love seeing them. And I loved Mariner's hair as well.
Yes.
She's a sexy woman, that Mariner.
It's the idea of going to a retro. You always tend, there's how many films you go retro and it's like, oop, they got the afro. It's an in joke, isn't it?
Yeah, it's like a Foxy Cleopatra from The Spy or Goldfinger.
You know what's funny? I was about to Google a com badge for like this era, and I have a bloody com badge literally on my desk. So the only thing though is that they got the com badges wrong because they should be coloured.
Ooh, mine's shiny.
So that is, you can tell what it is, even though it's wrong.
Yeah, and I noticed that they at least tried to emulate the look of it, which is fine. Again, it's an animated style, so it's got to be more simplistic. You can't have the cutouts and stuff.
Gold.
Yes, this is true.
Like, that's a legitimate mistake, because this is, if they're wearing these uniforms, it's in this era, because this show takes place 1 year after Nemesis, and they have a new uniform and a new com badge, so there is no time between. So that is another. They rarely make them, though, Stuart. And I'm calling out the one problem with seeing the uniforms and DS9 and the Olympic, which were all perfect. But they still missed out one thing. But hey ho. But yeah, beautiful to see them. They don't look as good animated, I thought, which I thought was interesting. Like, the new ones have more detail and pop. These old ones don't look as good animated, I thought. In this style.
I like them. I think they look great. But
I think what it's
I know
missing...
what you mean.
I think what it's missing is that there's actually a rim around the edge of there's two tones to the top. It's not just one generic color. And if it had that, it would have popped more. It's kind of a weird detail to see and it also has lines. Like, it needed 2 of those details extra. Because it looks a bit plain compared to the normal uniforms. But then, Pasteur, flawless. No
Which
registry,
is the
though.
Olympic class.
Sorry.
Yeah, no registry. And no medical symbol on the side. So we can assume that these ships are not all medical ships. I was under the assumption for a long time that the Olympic class was specifically a medical ship, just because of what we saw in All Good Things.
Yes.
But, they do establish that this is the ship she mentions in the first episode that made first contact with the pig people planet. She was serving aboard that at the time, and this is the same ship name. So at least one first contact mission and no medical symbol on the side. So we can assume it's just a standard ship that's out doing things.
But this now does retcon something. The pastor, as represented in All Good Things, was a new ship. Now, obviously, it wasn't a pride of the fleet, but because it looked so different, had different nacelles, it was a new ship. But this retcons it as being a average ship, and now old in the alternate future of All Good Things, which I guess kind of works that it's just doing medical. These things kind of like with the Miranda class were de-skilled from being like frontline to low line to medical to civilian.
See these being the surplus ships that were a little bit older, upfitted, refitted to be medical ships specifically because they're older designs. Maybe.
Well, they're not sleek, they're not stylish, they're not well armed, but they've got a lot of internal volume for not a lot of size. That's kind of what they do, and Mariner being assigned to a new ship, but just not a high-end ship, I like the idea of, because of a skill set. This is a cool first contact ship. It's a good class of ship. But I like the fact it's unchanged, because it does, like I say, it does give us a wholly different vibe for the Olympic that it is now, assuming the future happens, as in, at least vaguely, 20 years old. So I kind of like it.
Yeah, I do too. And I want to point out too at this point that there's somebody out there screaming. It's going to be in the comments. I probably already typed it. Well, the Olympic is based off of the old Daedalus class design. Blah blah blah. Yes, we know. A lot of people wanted to point that out, and I just wanted to let you guys know that we're aware of this.
But that was so obvious. Didn't think it needed to be mentioned.
You'd think, but I guarantee if I didn't mention it, it would have been all over the comment section.
But
these guys are idiots.
I can imagine that Cisco, it doesn't take place before DS9, assuming Cisco wasn't a god at this point, he could look out of his office and see the Olympic and look down to his desk and say, yeah, because that's where the Canon Daedalus classes come from, is Cisco's desk. He's got a miniature of a Daedalus class, so Very like these class, small thing. But hey, DS9, flawless. Like, even the texturing's good, and I've got a model DS9, and this is a well done replica.
Yeah, I wish we would have seen a little bit more of it. There should have been like a wide shot and that kind of zoomed in. I think this was very much there's the pylons. That's about it.
Well, it's the difference between like, here is DS9 cheeky reference, but also respect. Like if it was just the pylon that was docked, you'd be like, is that? So it's kind of that mid level reference.
And I just want to mention, too, that the interior shots here, I assume, are on board the ship, the Quinto or the Quito or whatever it's called.
Yeah.
Not the Quinto, but the Quito. Because even though it's DS9 colors, it's got the DS9 color palette, it doesn't look like anything we've seen in Deep Space Nine. I wish it would have been Quark's bar, honestly. That would have been fantastic. But anyway, she does say, you're the most handsome guy on the ship and all this. And just the few of the lines that were said during this implies that it's on the ship. Because I know during my first reaction video, there was a little confusion whether this was Deep Space Nine we were seeing. It could be one of the rooms, but we've seen a lot of interiors of Deep Space Nine. This doesn't have that Cardassian aesthetic.
Well,
it's got the color palette, but not the...
I think it breaks down to it's visually telling us it is with the colors, but they're reusing their existing assets of their internal sets. Because I did the same thing. It's clearly the ship. Just with it doesn't matter either way, honestly. Like, it kind of serves both. It's not said either way, but it is telling us one. I mean, why would you have the Federation room be brown? You wouldn't.
It's night shift. It's just the lighting.
I mean, sure.
Once they turn up the actual daylighting, it becomes brighter.
But yeah, I absolutely agree. It was a cleverly done thing. But yeah, it's definitely the ship. But the whole thing is a very interesting exercise in, we're going to show enough while still showing us nothing behind them. Like, there's nothing that sets the era or the ship. There's no design behind them. Or there's no designs behind the what do you say the ship was called? What, the Olympic variant was at DS9, but there's no traffic. So they got away with showing the familiar, the station, and the uniforms, but nothing behind it to kind of interfere with the potential canon problems. Like, they didn't throw in this, and this. They're not at Quark's bar where they would take a lot of time and effort. But it's an interesting. I'm glad they did it this way rather than failing to do it another way. It's just very nice to see. Very, very nice to see. I mean, blew me away. I was not expecting this, and I called that out from the very first episode. Like, we need to see this stuff. And it also creates the flashback concept. It's now been established.
Yes, and we know she's served on 5 different starships. This is just one of them that we've seen.
Yep.
So maybe there'll be more flashbacks to other ships.
But it also sets another interesting precedent, and I'm glad, she's an ensign here, but we know she was promoted at least once, and she's clearly looking to be younger. So she was an ensign in this era, and she's still an ensign, but 5 ships after this, and she's happy here. So this is before everything went bad.
Well, she said the Quito or whatever the ship is called, I can't remember offhand, was her last assignment before the Cerritos. I believe she says that in the first episode. So this is not that long ago.
I mean, we are 1 year after Nemesis, so it makes sense. This might be her first time in the new uniform, which would kind of be nice. And it means that any flashback we see with her would be, But you would assume a first contact and a second contact would be pretty close together. And so if she was reassigned, like, right before this... But then didn't she say she knew Boimler for about a year?
I'd have to go back and listen. I don't remember that.
So I'm kind of confused by all the timings. But speaking of timing, Stuart, what do we have? I've got some notes here. But what do we have that really kind of confuse the timings even further?
Oh, yes. The blonde, her friend, is telling the story of Data. Guess what? Data's got an evil twin brother, and he's been working with the Borg.
And it's like, did you hear?
That's Descent Part 1 and 2. That's the end of Season 6 and the beginning of Season 7 of TNG. And we know that the uniforms then were the standard Starfleet uniforms from TNG. So is it old news? Like, did this take a while to trickle down? Was it kind of top secret for a while? Who knows?
I mean, it is the Borg, so I can imagine it was more classified. Like, of all the events, Borg and there's this guy in the Enterprise that everyone likes. Oh yeah, he has a brother that got the Borg on his side. I can imagine that would be heavily classified, because seriously, so that might have just got out. So I can imagine that would be the caveat there. Although I kind of wish they'd had that as a in dialogue of, did you hear? Just released news, like, or finally talked about, etc. Yeah, it definitely is a bit screwy. Now, obviously, they got the comm badges wrong, so there's a slight problem in the scene anyway. And we noticed the Vancouver ship, they misdid the escape pods as windows. So there is a few mistakes in this episode. So it's kind of hard to say, well, is that a mistake, or is that an interesting canon thing? Because they're so good at those, I would be hard to press to think they'd made that big a time mistake. Because I've got dates here, Stuart. Do you want to hear some dates?
Let's hear some dates.
So Lower Decks, remind yourself, is 2380. 1 year after Nemesis, which is 2379. Well, Descent takes place in 2370. So 10 years before Lower Decks. So if Mariner was an ensign in Descent, and if these uniforms, and we'll get to that in a second, were here, and if that was breaking news, then she is 10 years been from ensign to Lower Decks, and Boimler came out of the academy, so she must be at least 10 years older than him, at least, even though they said they're the same age. We see Cisco in Emissary, and we see the crew in Generations using both uniforms. Because Cisco comes in with TNG, swaps to Voyager, everyone's wearing Voyager. I guess DS9, but I was thinking it was Voyager because they use them more. DS9 changed 3 times. But in Generations, they use both, which is literally they use Avery Brooks' uniform. They use the old uniforms at the same. So anyway, so that Emissary is 2369. Generations is 2371. So that's 2 years. In All Good Things, though, is 2370, and they're still wearing TNG. So the Enterprise D is at least a year and a half behind the uniform change. Fine, okay. And then Generations is both 2371. The first appearance of these new uniforms is DS9 Season 5. So for 5, that's halfway through, so for 5 seasons they use the Voyager DS9 ones. And that was 2373. So those uniforms existed only for like 4 years. So they actually weren't, we only think for Voyager they lasted long because they lasted, well, the 7 years of the show, but in reality it was only a 4-year uniform. And in the First Contact was the same year. So both First Contact and DS9 had the same year of the same change. They're designed for First Contact, but first seen in DS9. Nemesis being 2379, like I said, so that's 6 years later, still wearing Nemesis. So the very earliest this could have been for the uniforms, if the uniforms are brand new, it would be 23 73, which is 7 years before. So the very earliest this could be, which would make the news 3 years old at that point. And that would still make her... That would still assume this is a brand new uniform, like, absolute out the gate.
I don't know if it was an animator's choice to choose these uniforms, whether it was, you know, the reference was written. It's just an overlap of whatever. It would have been cool, actually, if the people in the background had different style uniform. Like we see in Generations, where they're wearing different uniforms in the same ship as kind of like the transition period. That would have been neat here, but...
Because if you'd put them in the TNG originals, that would have made her much older than him, because she is three costumes ago, but that would have been perfect. Or Voyager, we could have accepted that the news took 2 years to get out, fine. But for them to be this one, it's so intentional. I'm guessing that, you know, Mike can't do everything, but the team was like, okay, the script calls for DS9, and whoever was animating this picked up an episode of DS9, and it happened to be the Dominion War stuff because they know about that more, and they thought, okay, DS9, those uniforms. That's the connection, and then the reference was written separate to the costume animator, so there was no link there.
But that being said, I'm willing to accept that. I mean, we got a good audio reference, we got a good visual reference. Sure, they don't necessarily sync up time-wise, but explanations can be made for everything.
But we're getting up to 6 years of Trekyards, and if this news is 7 years old, then imagine us saying, did you hear Trekyards episode 1, this, and this? You'd be like, a bit of, like, because that's a real-time reference. Like, if you told me news from a year before, you know?
But at the same time, if you say, oh, did you hear about a certain movie that the trailer's coming out next week? It's like, yeah, they were filming that literally 5 years ago when they started filming production-wise. So, you know, if you compare it to something like that, and this is also the military, taking a little while for it to get out, especially the fact that there's another... I mean, I'm sure lore would be known about by that point because they've encountered him a few times, so that might have trickled out. But him working with the Borg, the Federation's biggest enemy, the biggest threat, could be something that Starfleet would keep under wraps.
Although, isn't it funny how this episode also... Picard couldn't mention lore. This episode both talked about lore and showed Data's daughter in the chalkboard, in the corkboard. So both of those things it showed, and Picard couldn't talk or show either. Wow, another guys on Picard. Come on. My assumption here, and I said this to you in another video, is an allegory to kind of a Facebook thing whereby if someone reposts a story from 5 years ago, well, most people who didn't see it then, it'll be new news because there's so much information. So don't think of it as, I mean, that's a massive event, but most people aren't going to know everything. And so I would take it as more someone reposted a, did you hear? And just like Chinese Whispers, if you said, did you hear? And didn't put the context of when it happened, then all you have to take is, 2 people, and now this person thinks it's new news. They haven't checked.
Yes,
you know,
exactly.
How many times we fact-check what we see online? So I wish, and so this would have made Mariner seem too, good at everything. I wish she would have said, oh, that was 7 years ago. And that would have been a nice, gotcha moment. But I'm kind of thinking it that way, it's just one of those, they didn't hear. Because Data's dead at this point. Potentially. So interesting, great scene. It's a canon scene with lots of complexity. Thanks for doing it, guys, while a bit confusing at the same time. And you know what? Maybe we'll get to talk to Mike McMahon again, and we'll ask him. Well, we'll be able to tell him Mariner is definitely not the same age as Boimler, because she's definitely not the same age as Boimler. Does not make sense. No.
Well, from the first episode, we've kind of come to the conclusion. I've come to the conclusion in my mind she's at least 10 years older than him. Kind of like the difference between me and Sylvia. I'm 10 years 10 years older than Sylvia. So, anyway, yeah. And in the future, people don't really age as the same they do now. So, I have no problems with that. No problem.
Yeah, she's probably 29 and he's 19, or 20, right at the academy, which is what they say. Absolutely fresh, and she's right at the start of the 30s.
Well, she's been promoted and demoted now at least twice, probably more, knowing her character.
Yeah, extra because we just saw one.
Yeah.
But it's really interesting. It's a really interesting scene, and thanks for doing it. And to see, we've not seen literal TNG canon and I'm saying TNG in the scope of that era of TNG DS9 Voyager, since the end of Enterprise, we saw the Enterprise D, where they got it. They got that D more right than Picard did. They missed out on so many details, etc. That would be the closest. I guess that'd be the other version, but so it was good to see. It's good to see.
Yes.
Well done them.
And I'm looking forward to seeing more because we know she has served on 5 ships, so this is just one of them.
And doesn't that just tell you that we're going to see more Canon ships? People wondering, are we going to see the Defiant? Well, we've seen the Olympic. I think we're going to have to see more as the season goes on. They want to obviously show their own universe first, but we're going to see some other Canon ship designs. We're gonna.
Yeah. Well, guys, I think that's it for this flashback to Canon and our discussion based therein. Maybe we got a little too nitpicky, but that's what we do. We know the time.
I just told you dates, Stuart. I just rolled out the facts. Not nitpicky at all.
Somebody has to do it.
People were thinking it, Stuart. This is one that I think a lot of people were thinking because it didn't connect.
Somebody's got to point it out.
Yeah.
So put it in the comments whether you noticed it, where you thought about it. Would you think the dates lined up? Whatever. Let us know in the comments section down below. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel and click the notification bell icon to all so you get notified every time we upload and do our lives, which we do lives quite often, and we discuss these kind of things. And you can join the conversation live and let us know that you thought about it, that we're wrong, that you think this. That's the great part about the lives. So make sure you're subscribed.
And when you're in those lives, you can super chat directly to support the channel. Super, super useful. They do make the channel keep going. YouTube, as we said, is a fickle mistress, and we don't rely on it, unfortunately, anymore for ad revenue, but we rely on you guys in your many platforms to support us, to help us do content. It's free. Our content's free every single week, every single month, and for almost 6 years now, home mama, a lot of content. So support us on Super Chats, Patreon, PayPal, which is trekyards@hotmail.com. There's a PayPal, or join the YouTube channel and Super Chat as well. So lots of great ways. Please do if you can.
That's right. And until next time, I'm Captain Foley.
I am Canon. Bye, guys.
See you guys.